This is Season 3, Episode 3 of Mastering the RPG, a tabletop RPG podcast all about upping your game. Doesn't matter if you're a game master or a player, you'll find advice, ideas, and some strong opinions. Tonight's episode is Game Mastering by the Seat of Your Pants, or I meant to do that. Welcome to Mastering the RPG. Like I said, it's a tabletop RPG podcast all about giving advice, ideas, cool stuff found, answering emails, all sorts of good stuff. If you want information about the show, go to masteringtherepg.com and you can send us email, feedback, or questions at gamemaster at masteringtherepg.com. That's a mouthful. Hey, it's great to be on the mic. I'm here with my co-host Eric and James. How you doing, guys?
Going great. Going really good. Started my latest term of Dungeons & Dragons with our kids group this week, so I'm well into my 5 weekly campaigns at the moment and having a ball.
Ooh, up to the all in on the 5. Awesome. We were just able to finally get moving on our campaign that we're working on, our Pathfinder Savage Worlds campaign. We finally were starting to get a little momentum going. Players introduced themselves, and they went and met up with some folks, and they finally have decided
Didn't meet at a tavern. We did not meet at a tavern.
Oh, no.
We actually met at several different locations. We had to travel between one introduction, so that was interesting. But I was the anchor, which is not what I expected to be, because I'm like kind of the most outcast of everyone. So that was an interesting twist. I think it's just because I did the most prep work, right, Carl? Like as far as my backstory and.
Well, your backstory was very rich, and it was very good as far as why you would want to go do things, because you were part of this warden group.
Yeah, I made a faction. I had a page on a faction. I went real deep because this is supposed to be like one of our epic campaigns, right? We're going long on this one. So.
We're hoping so.
Yeah.
And everyone else was kind of...
So I've been doing okay this week. I've been busy, but I'm a little under the weather now, so probably gonna a little be hard for me to talk a lot. But yeah, I'll try to struggle through it.
All right. Well, I wish good health to you, and hopefully you recover quickly.
Yeah, please.
You got 2 weeks before we have to talk again, so hopefully you'll be healthy by then. So we actually have 2 emails tonight that we want to go through.
Email.
All right, we have 2 emails. The first is by Andy, and Andy writes, "Hello, fellow adventurers. My name is Andy, and I love the podcast as well as Carl's Savage Worlds YouTube channel." Now, that's Eric and Carl's channel. After listening to your experience of getting the group together in Season 3, Episode 2, I was curious as to hear about some of your favorite characters that you either have played, NPCs you have ran, or PCs that surprised you that folks in your gaming groups have come to the table with. I have DM'd for over 40 plus years, from the Moldvay edition all the way up to 5e, as well as numerous other systems and genres. Always interested in hearing about characters that evolved into greatness through long-running campaigns. Cheers to you, and may the dice be forever in your favor. May the dice be forever in your favor. Andy. Well, that's a great, cool question, I think. I've got some thoughts on it, but I'm going to turn it over to James for his thoughts to start with.
Characters. I love characters. Characters is kind of why we do this thing. So thank you so much, Andy, for the question. I've got some well-used characters that I've loved, that I've both played and run as NPCs, and I've got kind of the weird honour of dungeon mastering for hundreds of people. So I've seen some very strange characters in my time, some very memorable ones that other people have played. In terms of characters that I've played that have evolved into greatness and things that I've done for a long time, I finished last year a campaign that we ran of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons that went from level 1 to level 20. Hagen Hearthold was my dwarf ranger multi-class Ranger Fighter multi-class. It was absolutely fantastic. I loved playing a curmudgeonly old dwarf. He was kind of well into his hundreds that needed a rocking chair to sit down, had an absolute ball to play him and to take on that persona. Really, really loved it. One of my older characters that I played for coming on to 6 years was a Vampire the Eternal Struggle character called Zeontes, which was a Toreador violinist that was immortal. Absolutely loved playing him for a very long period of time. In terms of NPCs, Eric knows one of my NPCs quite well, which is Umwerta the Hag that I used within Fey Touched. I managed to torture Eric quite well with Umwerta, or that entire group, for a couple of months. Umwerta's actually not the first time that she's appeared in one of my games. She's been a hag in Fey-like games for probably close to 10 years now. An insidious, horrible, child-eating hag that I kind of drop on many groups just because I love her and enjoy playing her multiple times. I have a travelling salesman that I've been using for close to 20 years now, named Shifty McSwifty, and this predates Taylor Swift, so I'm just going to own it. All of my kids' group have now met Shifty every year. Some of my old D&D mates that I've been playing with on and off for 15 years knows Shifty McSwifty, and so I use him as a recurrent kind of travelling salesman every time that we need to do a little bit of shopping and they want to do that. Swifty is a fantastic thing. In terms of unusual characters I've ever dealt with, probably the strangest character I've ever played with is a guy I know named Jack, who brought to me a halfling bard that was a whistler. And it was a bit kind of Marx Brothers in that this halfling bard never actually spoke, just whistled for everything that they wanted to articulate. So for a bard with high charisma and high persuasion skill, we still rolled to see how well they'd persuade, but it was all about whistling classical music tunes to try and personify the group. And he kept this up for close to 3 years.
No way.
It would have done my head in after
No
about
way.
4 sessions, but he played it ongoing for quite a while, which was quite extraordinary.
Wow.
So that's been the weirdest character that's ever come up to my table. Of course, there's hundreds of others. There's been lots of great fun over the years, but they're probably the one that comes to mind. How about you, Eric? You would have played some weird guys in your time.
There's too many. I mean, it's like your favorite child, you know? I mean, I would say some of my favorite characters in campaigns have been in your guys' campaigns, for sure. I mean, Bisbo was a lot of fun to play, and just playing a kobold is always a good time, especially one that's an adventure in a world where they're like treated as almost slaves. So that was kind of fun to flip the script on that one. Carl's games, I played a kind of, you know, Oliver Twist cat cyber solo monk that dual whips mono whips on a bike and was like a show off because he wanted to impress people all the time, and that was just crazy. And I played like an adventure child in one of his campaigns. A really interesting character I had was this kind of in another Deadlands. It's like a science fiction Deadlands. I was a kind of escaping a war from Ukraine. I don't think I was from Ukraine, was I? I was from one of those Balkan states, but I escaped to Russia, and I had made a pact with what presented as Coyote from Native American folklore, and would kind of we used the mechanic of the deal, like he was a gambler, so I used cards to represent like dealing with the devil, which is part of the mechanic of the arcane caster, but it was like dealing with Coyote, who was a trickster, so sometimes did things that I didn't want him to do, and made me do things that I didn't want to do. I've had so many games that it's, you know, it's hard to really go through them all. But yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, just those were just pretty memorable characters.
What's the weirdest one that you've ever played with? Weirdest character someone else has come up with and put in front of you?
Oh, I don't even. I mean, I've seen it all, man. I mean, yeah. I think the weirdest ones are when people can't speak for whatever reason. You know, that's always going to be an interesting take. And I remember somebody. I mean, like right now, I'm playing a fairy dragon, who's been kind of like as a circus attraction, And he's broken free, but he can't like fly anymore, and he has to keep his shape different. And he's been trying to convince everyone to start a button empire, and that he's like a king of some floating city. So that's been a fun character just recently. Anyways, go on, Carl. What about you?
Well, my absolute favorite character I've played. Now, I've played a few, but I game master most of the time. But my favorite character of all time was Brumby, the Illusionist. And Brumby is started in AD&D First Edition. And if you remember back then, the Illusionist was not the most powerful character class.
No, not at all.
A lot of the spells had descriptions that said, go see the wizard spell of this level, and you had a much smaller list. But man, he just had so much fun messing with people left, right, up, and down, color spraying them, knocking them out, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was a lot of fun. And I actually kind of reinvigorated him for a D&D 3.5 short-term campaign that I was in for a little bit. I just love Brumby. He just had a style to him. And he was a gnome. So a gnome illusionist. How can you go wrong with a gnome illusionist,
classic.
Right?
That's a classic.
Yeah,
and
did
you bring that up, Carl, it makes me think of actually my last character with you. And this is more like the way I flavored the arcane background. And it was pretty meta. But we were in this kind of... it was like after the singularity, so we were in a post kind of apocalypse world, and there was all this like high technology, and I had an illusionist character, and I flavored the illusion as like the whole power set, because it's Savage Worlds. I flavored it all as it's basically a portable what's it called in Star Trek, the illusion room, portable
Holodeck.
A portable holodeck, but it was all about, it was a game, I called it Mystics and Marauders, and it was a Mystic and Marauders armband. So all my powers were like create NPC, like, switch layer, like a VTT layer. And like, it was all those things because it was this like high technology. So that was just a really fun concept. I just wanted to bring up, but anyways.
Well, now my favorite NPC is actually has been in a few of these games, Eric, that you played into.
Oh yeah,
which is Pax. Pax is a robot, and so he was a fixer in a cyberpunk game. He ran the ship in one game. He was sort of the bad guys in the post-apocalyptic one where they ran kind of the world in the background. So Pax shows up all the time with a little bit different personalities, but always the same token. Always the same token because it's Pax. And then players I played with, there's so many. I think I'll tell you the most memorable are Eric's characters because you go all in. A lot of players just kind of they scratch the surface of their players, but you go all in. So your characters are always super super interesting. So there's a couple other folks in my current group who've had a few really interesting growth curves. Like one of the characters was a cop who was undercover in the cyberpunk world and grew to the point where they were famous. And they were the best cop in the world, and nobody knew they were a cop who were playing with them until this later. So they kind of evolved from quiet to more gregarious and helping out, and it was all sort of happenstance that happened. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, cool stuff. Really good. Great question. Great question. Any other thoughts?
Why don't you? And for others, send in your characters. Let's hear about them too. For those that are listening, send us through your weirdest character. We can kind of touch base and have a bit of a chat about it. It'd be great.
Yeah, we could. That's a great idea. So do that. And where do you do that? Game Master at masteringtherpg.com. So there you go. So our second email of the evening here is from Rob. Says, hello, I was curious for those of you that have, how do you start an online group? I am talking about from scratch, not people you already know. I find it very intimidating to try and start a new online group with strangers. How do you vet and decide on those that will fit? How do you get your players to mesh? Rob, that's a great question.
That could be almost an episode. And I feel like we've touched on this in other episodes, like bits of it, right? But I think we've all started online groups, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have. I met all of you through online groups. So,
yeah. Literally. I think the hardest part is finding a place where you can post to get those online groups. Fortunately for me, when we were using Roll20, it has a very good looking for group feature that you can post what your game is, what you're trying to accomplish, a good description. I find that the most important thing when you're getting folks and you're vetting them is to have a very clear social contract in the looking for group posting, things that you have your expectations, because you want to weed folks out a little bit before you even get to a session zero. So the expectation, how the players will work together, how the players will engage with the story, gaming style, a lot of the session zero social contract stuff, you might want to state up front right away. But I don't know. Go ahead.
I mean, like I said, this could be a whole episode. But I mean, Reddit and Discord obviously are the best places outside of Roll20, especially for other games, I think. And people generally are good on Reddit. But just like you said, be very clear in your posting. I think it's good to have not a long description of your game, but not like just a sentence either. And in that, have them do a short what's it called? Sorry, like a short questionnaire, like just 3 or 4 questions of like, your name, age, like maybe pronouns, but then like, how do you like playing your game? Like what kind of games do you like? Things like that. And then what I've also done is like, I think some people do this where they're like, and then at the end of your questionnaire, like put the word pineapple or something, just to see if that person's actually read the thing, because there's a lot of players who will just go through and just like, do an automatic response, and they won't, like, they didn't actually read your whole posting. So that's a little trick that I've used before. And then after you've done that, like just have a short interview with the person. Like, it just has to be like for a minute, and just to hear their voice, hear if their recording software is good. Just hear if they're like, they can dialogue with you, and just ask them like just some light questions. So I think those are the best ways. And then as far as the players meshing, like we talked about that a lot in episode 2, I think. And, just having a big session zero, like we always talk about, and, having people kind of talk about their characters and how they're interacting, and just kind of seeing it that way. Just having everybody kind of come together, and then having, like we've talked about, either them knowing each other or partial relationships, things like that. I think episode 2 was a good example of that.
Yeah, I think episode 2 hit right upon that.
It did. Yeah, I mean, for me, congratulations. If you're a dungeon master or a games master, filling a group's a lot easier than trying to find a group when you're a player. Let me tell you. I think you've got the advantage there.
Yeah.
Discord, Reddit. I use Facebook a lot to try and get people on, because there are local Facebook pages that you can often find. So I have a looking for group in my home city Facebook page. So all you have to do is put an advert up for your game, and you tend to get people up straight away. I totally agree with everything that Eric has said, being very specific with the description about your game and the purpose, meeting individuals before you put the session together. One thing that I always do as well is I tend to run a get-to-know-you one-shot session for groups, for campaigns that will be going for a long period of time. I don't do this with kids groups. I find that kids are actually much easier to manage. In terms of if you're a new kid, kids are so used to being told what to do by parents and teachers.
Yeah,
that you can
and being
kind
in
of
school,
tend to say,
right?
This is how we do it, and they're also used to being thrown together with other children that they may not like very much. They're used to it. With adults, we tend to be a bit more selective with the arseholes we hang out with. So it becomes a little bit more different for adult players. So I run a little one shot just to see what the group's like. It tends to only go for about an hour. I select pre-made characters just to get a sense of how they go, and then just throw them in the deep end. And then that's how I can figure out if the group dynamics is going to work. I did the same when we auditioned for Feytouch. We did that exact thing. We put together a little 1 hour one shot. In the end, one of the players didn't find it was right for her, moved on, and it made for a lot easier to get that through. I think that you'll find once you put it out there online, I want to run a game, you will be inundated with people. So you are able to be a bit picky. You are able to be a bit choosy. And it's not just about the personalities gelling together. It's also the personalities working with you, I guess, because you can play role-playing games in such a wide variety of styles, from heavy roleplay to heavy combat to ultra realistic. Getting that mix right for you is really, really important. So for me, 1 hour, play for an hour, see what you think. It's much better than putting together a long campaign and have it fall apart after 3 or 4 sessions just because people don't like the style of the game.
Yeah, I think that one-shot idea is a really good idea. To just run a one-shot with the group and see how everybody interacts with each other. Definitely a good idea.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, James, like, and we talked about this in episode 2 too, but as far as the one-shot idea goes, like, especially with your one-shot specifically, we played characters that are in the same game world as the campaign. And so
Yeah.
later on when we played our actual characters, it was, like, cool that they were part of the history. I kind of mess with you. I made your character, like, a really funny one to play.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, so that was really fun to do that. But yeah, so it's good. It's a cool thing to do too. And again, just like we talked about in episode 2, it'll give your players more connections to the campaign that you're running, because they'll be like, oh, we know those characters, like, we played them before. They already feel invested in your world. So I think it's cool to do the one shot in the world that you're going to be playing too as well.
Great.
Okay, sounds great. All right, well, hey, thanks everybody for the email. Keep them coming. Love to receive them and think about them. They always generate cool ideas when we're talking together to guys and say, hey, that's kind of cool. We didn't think about that idea or that thought. So, hey, what do you say we get on to the main topic?
Mastering the RPG with Connor, Eric, and James. Yeah.
All right, welcome to the main topic. So tonight we're talking about game mastering by the seat of your pants. And what does that mean? So I know what it means to me. It means, sort of players taking different actions during an adventure, kind of going left when you thought they were going right, or even taking different directions between adventures, going someplace that you didn't think they were going. You thought they were going there, and then they're not. I don't know. What do you guys think of that you have to handle? Is that a good definition for you, or do you think there's more to it than that?
Yeah, I think so. I think they deal with the two main things, is kind of dealing with the curveballs of your players. And I mean, let's face it, the beauty of role-playing games is that you can do anything you want, really. But a lot of that means that the dungeon master, the games master's got to think very, very quickly on her feet. You've got to pivot as quickly as you can to try and accommodate that. And the big one for me, which is the most difficult one, is when they go direct right off the rails and kind of choose an entirely different path than what you had planned or what you thought that the adventure was going to be before you sat down for the session. That's the real tricky one for me. I think you're right, Carl. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yep. So, all right. So what are the challenges that come with doing this? I mean, obviously thinking of ideas in a moment can be difficult. That's an obvious one where, you've got something prepared, you've got it thought out, you're sort of, it's in your brain, right? It's been integrated into your thought process, and now suddenly you kind of get yanked out of that zone, and you have to get the creative juices going, like turn the faucet on instantaneously. Because, honestly, when you got all your prep work done, sometimes you're running a little bit on, not autopilot's not the right term, but you're sort of, this is what's happening, and now this is going to happen, and now this is going to happen. And then it's just like, you got to throw that out, and you got to completely rethink about what's going on. You got to be careful not to say things that completely break the long game, I guess. Your campaign, the things that define the continuity of your campaign or your lore or what have you, because it's easy to come up with something fast and then realize that that's just completely derailed sort of the overall arcing worldview that you had, which is not necessarily bad, right? I mean, you just run with it and go with it, but it certainly is something that kind of requires some creativity and requires being able to think about stuff without getting yourself off the rails, I guess. What are some of the other challenges? Eric, what do you think?
I mean, those are definitely the main ones. I think a big one is almost an emotional one of like, like so for somebody like I have ADHD, and one of the symptoms of that is you can get easily overwhelmed, or you can start to like have like, cascading thoughts kind of thing. And I think that can affect anybody, right? Where it seems like, okay, my house of cards, my narrative, it's a house of cards is falling apart. And then they can get you can almost get like upset, or start to be stressed out about it. And like, okay, I'm thinking too much about it. And I think that can really affect, and then maybe DMs are hard on themselves because they're like, oh, I'm not, because I can't like bounce at this back immediately, I'm not a good GM or something. So I do think there's like an emotional thing here because, what's a success? What does it mean to be a successful game master? And is it the ability to tell just a good story? Is the ability to think on your feet and be good at improv? I mean, there's a lot of those things, but I think it's just one of those things where like it can really affect someone because if somebody put a lot of work into a certain adventure or the narrative, then that can really demoralize you. So yeah.
What do you think, James? What are some of the? Are there any other challenges that you can think of that we?
I think you've covered off the big three for me. The trick is, the other challenge for me is with material that you've prepared and that you're ready to go with. It comes with a visualization that you've had prior, and this is a little bit about needing to think of these ideas in the moment. If I've got a game session that I've been mulling over for a couple of hours before the game, and you kind of know what the flow is going to be like, and you've kind of come up with the highlights, and you've put your pacing together so that you get these up and down beats, and you're kind of ready to go. It's when you've replaced that with something you're having to quickly ad lib and change, and the group's gone in a different direction. One of the challenges for me is maintaining the quality of what you're preparing, because thinking quickly on the fly means you don't have the long passages of description that you might have done, or you don't have the well fleshed out NPC that you can engage with. It makes it a little bit trickier, and so you end up running a more shorthand game rather than a more detailed, luxurious kind of rich experience. So that for me is the challenge, is not just doing it, pivoting quickly and coming up with good ideas, but pivoting quickly and having it appear somewhat seamless, so it doesn't look like you're completely flying by the seat of your pants and that this wasn't completely unprepared, even though it totally was. It's kind of trying to keep the level of quality up there when you're bluffing your ass off is kind of the trick for me.
Yeah, ignore the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so definitely a lot to think about. So why don't we think about what would we do to help? What are some ideas to combat these challenges and the different kind of stages during the preparation, during the game, even after the game? What are some of your thoughts around that? How about during preparation? What are some things? It seems counterintuitive, right? During preparation, but what are some of the things you can do ahead of time to be able to react in that moment easier? Eric,
So
what do you think?
one of my go-to guys that I talk about this guy all the time, and it's Sly Flourish with Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and he has provided me with such great resources to be able to deal with things that go awry and deal with things that go, kind of in complete curveball ways that you go. And what he recommends, and I thoroughly recommend this as well, is in terms of preparation, it's to be a little bit more loose in terms of what you're preparing all the time, so that you're not falling into the trap of preparing rigidly, which means then you're railroading yourself, and then when people do something different, then it is calamitous for you. You can't. So it's actually preparing to be surprised in some ways. So having some resources ready to go, having some ideas ready to go that don't necessarily rely on the path that you thought the characters would take. Sly Flourish does something called Secrets and Clues, which I think is amazing. What he recommends is that you put out 10 sentences at the start of each of your sessions on some information that should be provided to the group about your plot, but he never says who's going to provide that information. Which means if the characters take a complete left turn and go somewhere entirely different, you can still provide the same information related to your ongoing plot that allows the story to keep going without completely railroading it. In the same vein, he suggests you prepare scenes, but not any specific order that the scenes should go in, so that you can, depending on the way that the players emerge and the decisions that they make, you can pop a scene and you can change things around. So in some ways, the best advice I can give about how to prepare for curveballs is not be too rigid in your preparation to begin with. That allows you to be a little bit more flexible as the game goes on. if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
find
always leave openings.
I find Sly Flourish's ideas around secrets and clues, and I also add in truths. Really helps with that continuity problem or lore breaking, because you have 10 truths about the world that you can pluck that are going to work within the continuity and the lore and sort of what you're trying to do. You've already got that built up, and they never see them. But if that curveball comes, you're ready. So I really like how he defines that. And actually, I've started doing that a little bit more than I used to. He has a template for Notion, which is a note-taking software. And I stole that template from him. And so it had all that in there already. And so it was easy to start adopting sort of that practice. Really good stuff. Another thing I find that's related when he talks about just kind of scenes and truths and secrets is to remember that I'm in the problem department, not the solution department. So if I don't spend a lot of time defining the solution or digging into, well, this should happen and this should happen and this is how they're going to solve, there's no curveballs, because any strange plans the players come up with make perfect sense. Just set out the problem, and then you can do that in scenes. Like I literally sometimes just bullet out the adventure and say, here's some of the key things about the adventure, but you know what? I don't know how they're going to get into the Citadel. I don't care. That's their problem, not my problem. My problem is just to define that there's a Citadel here. So that's another one that I think is a really good thing to go along with the don't over prep and recognize that you want to be able to get used to doing things on the fly. Eric, what do you thought? Yeah, I think you got some thoughts there you were pondering.
Yeah, I mean, well, those are both extremely excellent suggestions. And then for me, one of the things that I do, which is a little bit more actually preparatory, is I will pre-prep a bunch of combat maps, and not just like basic maps. I mean, and I don't go like, again, definitely leave it open, but like maps that fit multiple, quote unquote, biomes or ecosystems, or like say in the case of Fallout, I had like a highway map and I had like a toxic ooze map and I had like a interior, like I had like a cafe map, and with some like basic themes, like, okay, I know that in the toxic ooze maps they're going to be ghouls, right? And then I did just have this little mechanic kind of set up there to make it a little bit more interesting than just like a basic random encounter. That almost seems like I prepped it ahead of time for whatever, because those are just going to be the easiest thing to throw in. And we'll talk about that more. But yeah, so pre-pepping some like basic combat encounters that could fit different suggestions. And I'll often pre-pep a side quest of some sort that maybe has a very flexible beginning. Again, and not over-prepping it, but that it is completely different from the main narrative, like a side quest in a video game where there's that side quest that's like very different from the narrative, that I can use it at some point if I need to. If they've gone so into left field, and I'm like, okay, well, nothing in my narrative makes sense, but I have this side quest here that I can easily fit into what they are trying to do now. That's another helpful thing that I've done. Again, not over prepping it, but just like and not a very long one. We're talking about a 2-3 session max kind of side quest idea. That maybe is a little railroady, but it just has such a different feel from the main quest, and that's flexible enough that you can just kind of drop in when you need to.
And I think aligned with that is things that you might need on the fly. Just pull a list together, like names of NPCs, some simple places, things like that.
Generators that you might use. Things.
Yeah. I mean,
like things that give personality. Yeah, things like that. Yeah, for sure.
Now
and there's nothing wrong at all in preparation. If people are doing a big curveball on you or moving in other different directions, nothing wrong with rolling up just a quick random encounter just to give you some time to think about things as well.
Yes.
Just to kind of go, all right, that's fine.
That's what I was going.
Yeah, it's kind of like quickly change, give yourself some breathing time. But absolutely couldn't agree with you more, Eric. Preparing a variety of maps and scenarios that you've got in your back pocket ready to go. Really, really, really important. And for me, I'm lucky because I run multiple campaigns. I can prepare once and have it for different games. But even for when you're preparing for a singular game, having a map with the tavern in it ready to go, having the highway ready to go, having the mountaintop ready to go, will help you in the long run for sure.
I found I've become very good at, thanks to the digital VTTs. I have a big folder full of maps that are all labeled.
Yeah.
And I find that I'm getting very, very good at, while people are saying, hey, we should go do this thing, to go, yep, I got a map, drop it in to the thing, go to my bestiary that's in there, grab a couple of creatures. It's not even really prepared. It's just, I know I've got the map. I know that I can pull things in, and VTT, it all happens behind the scenes and nobody even knows that it's going on at the time. So,
well, and Savage Worlds makes that easier too, as far as quote unquote balance. I mean, it's definitely more complex when you're talking about D&D or Pathfinder, things with CR like levels and encounter balance, things like that. Savage Worlds doesn't have that really, and it's more kind of innate experience. But yeah, I think all levels, having your big category, your big folders of maps, having preset maps up that you can easily like make harder if they're a higher level, and then do like a side quest thing. But for sure, Carl.
Yeah. And so I also would like to maybe with you guys touch a little bit upon that the one of the problems that I mentioned was sort of when you're being creative on the fly, things that don't align kind of with the long-term campaign ideas you had, or breaks lore, or breaks kind of the continuity of what's there. What do you do to kind of help with that? How do you approach that? Personally, I spend a lot of time just understanding people's motivations and what their plans are, and what's going on in the world at the time. So if players do a curveball, I know that the bad guy is going to react in a certain way because I've internalized it. So that's a term. I've internalized everything that's going on in the world. So when I make something up, I've already recognized that it's probably not going to break anything, because I just understand it intuitively, what's happening. So does that ring true for you? What are some thoughts you guys have to kind of not break your setting when you're
very much. And one of the things, I guess, in terms of all campaigns, if you've got an understanding about what your antagonists are doing in the background, and it's independent of what the player characters are doing. So a great example is I ran a game called Storm King's Thunder last year, and one of my groups decided they didn't want to fight the giants anymore. They wanted to set up a travelling circus, and they would travel from town to town and perform for gold, which happened about halfway through the campaign, and it was like a very cheeky, they were 12-year-olds, so they were just, being cheeky. But that didn't mean that the giants weren't going to continue to invade the world just because they decided they'd take a few sessions off. And so, we got to role-play them running a circus, and they got to travel through a few towns, and it lasted a few sessions, and everyone had a ball until the giants came through their circus tent and started to attack them directly. So, don't feel like... If you keep the world running true to form, regardless of what the players do, then there will be consequences of inaction or a change of direction that will bring them back to the fold.
Yeah, I think on top of that, which is I think what you were pretty much saying, but my favorite trick is if you need to get players back on track into your narrative, you take something away that's important to them. Yep. And every single time they will be invested to then go after that thing, as long as it's a chance for the guy. And that could either be an NPC, that could be a magic item that they had, that could be a great resource they had, that could be, any of those things. Take something away that's important to them. Guaranteed, they will move heaven and earth to get that thing back, or to have revenge on the thing that took that away. So that is a tried and true, surefire method, in my opinion. Which I think what you guys were pretty much saying, but just even if it's a quick thing, that's sorry, go on.
If you don't do my story, I kidnap your mother. Perfect. I love it, Eric. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, give them some space, like you said, James, to play, but then, take their mother away, take their favorite bartender, and so the daughter's crying to them, oh, they kidnapped the bartender, my father, that kind of thing.
If only we had heroes here to stop them, it would have worked perfectly. Sure.
Exactly, yeah.
If only they weren't in the circus performing. If they had been in the tavern meeting, things would have been better. So any other...
But
go ahead.
And I should say, look, we're coming up with solutions here, but I don't want to seem too harsh about curveballs, because curveballs
No.
I actually quite love as part of the game.
Yeah.
It means that we're not playing computer games, right? And it takes us away from board games. Fey Touched is a great example. These guys, when I played them, I thought that the group was going to be closing down a magic portal to the Feywild. I thought that they would be helping the humans to close off the portal so that the Fey armies couldn't continue to come into the world. Nope. They turned on their soldiers and went into the portal instead. Huge curveball that changed my entire game, and I loved every second of it. So, you know, these are the fun parts of the game. So while we're talking about solutions, please don't think it's a negative thing, because I think the curveball is what makes the game fun.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I don't
for
think it definitely wasn't. Didn't want to imply that. I think it's when we talk about understanding the motivations, internalizing the world, things like that. Those are all to handle that curveball without, you know, kind of breaking. And then you know, I know what Eric, what you're saying is taking something away. The idea is to get them kind of back a
in.
little bit on the path, but
Yeah.
still take what they've done. I mean, because we're not railroading, you know, take what they've done and their ideas, and it becomes part of that narrative. But you get a chance to think about it, as opposed to just immediately react, and then it's kind of it. And then something, I think that's kind of where you were coming from, Eric, more than just
Yeah,
forcing
absolutely.
anything,
And
right? Yeah.
And I think, James, like your own examples really illustrate, and neither of them are actually bad, but like in that case with the Fey Touch, like while it was a big curveball, we were still within your narrative, right? Like we were
Yes.
still playing into the narrative. With your kids who are doing Storm King's Thunder and then decided to do a circus, right? That is not within that narrative. So while you let them play for those 3-4 sessions, eventually you had to get them back on track for that one, right? It wasn't like
Yes.
this is a circus game now. It was like, no, we're still playing Storm King's Thunder. You had your fun. Now we're getting back to the giants. So those are, I think, you really illustrated two different scenarios where curveballs can be vastly different as far as upending the narrative.
And just for the record, that those 12-year-olds are now 14, and they're choosing to travel the world of Critical Role Alexandria as food tasters this session. So now they're trying every culinary treat they can in the world, and that's their story, and they're sticking to it. So
All right.
you know, some groups you just can't help. I think is the other side of this.
So I love that. They're what's that TV show where the guy goes around the world and tries the craziest, weirdest food?
Yeah,
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird
Yeah.
eats or
So
something. Weird food. Yeah.
I've got a group of 6 of those that's all they're doing. So it's weird. They're a weird group.
I just love that. That's awesome. So I don't even know if I can continue. That's just so funny. Anyway, so we kind of touched upon preparation, some of the things about understanding your world so that you can react to it. So let's talk a little bit like during play. So we're actually in the game, things are happening, and these curveballs are coming. They're like in the moment. You know, so now we're talking about seat of your pants for real. So what are some of the ideas that you think about when that scenario comes up? So what do you
Try not to panic is the first one.
Yes.
Don't let them see your fear is kind of the way that I work at it. I guess there's a couple of things there. It's the don't panic. Take a big deep breath, and then try and get as clear a response as you can from the group about what it is that they're trying to achieve, what it is that they're trying to get out of it. So that can allow for a break. You go, oh, hang on a minute, let's just hold that for a second. I just want to be clear about what it is you're trying to do here. So we're going to turn our back on the giants, and we're going to become a traveling circus. Am I clear on what it is that we're trying to do? So you give them a second chance to rethink what their thought process, but it also means that you can articulate and give you some time to think. So asking them some really specific questions to figure out what it is that they're trying to do and what it is they're trying to achieve, because sometimes it could be aligned with your story, but it's just a bit of a curveball, a little bit out there. So taking a big deep breath and doing it. And it is really okay to kind of ask for a break at that point. You can say, actually, this
Absolutely.
isn't kind of where we were thinking we were going for here. Why doesn't everyone grab a drink? I just need 15, 20 minutes just to kind of get my thoughts together and just to kind of prepare what we're going to do next. Not panicking, being really clear with the players about what it is they expect, and then calling for a break would be my instant response to a curveball.
It is not,
Or even
a
like
sign of
ending the
weakness.
session. Yeah, that is what we all, So, and I think we've touched about it a lot, is that like everybody goes through this. It's the struggle is real, and exactly, Carl. It's not a sign of weakness. And I think, Carl, on your point, James, is also, you could also end the session early. If you're like nearing the end, if you have 30 minutes left or something of the session, then we're ending the session early. People will be cool with that. And like, I think, James, you brought this up before. My favorite thing is playing for time. Like, absolutely. And I think we touched upon that in the preparatory stage, is that if you need to run to the end of the session, but you don't want to end it early, play for time. Throw in a combat. It can be any combat. I mean, like we talked about, there's preset ones, but if you just need to do the most random of random encounters, which I usually don't even like. I don't like random encounters, but absolutely, if there's a curveball, stretch out that comp, make a long random encounter. Two of the other things you can do is, their social conflicts can actually last a long time. And also, what I call is the traveling merchant or traveling vendor. And to buy for time, especially if you've been kind of maybe skimping on, the availability of magic items, like shopping. Shopping always takes a ridiculous amount of time that you never think it is. So throw them a weird merchant that has full of curios that like maybe you roll on like have some fun with this merchant that just has like weird magic items and that they'll have to like look up or decide between. So that can eat up a lot of time. So that's one of my main tips, is just play for time and run the clock basically until then you have more time to kind of think about it, between the games. But James, I love your suggestion, and just being honest with your players of like, if you're struggling, be like, I'm struggling. Like I'm going to think about things, communicate, like you said. I think that's probably the number one thing, is that you don't let them know you're afraid, but if you are struggling, it's fine that you are communicative with that.
Yeah, it's no coincidence one of my made NPCs that I've run is Shifty McSwifty, because he's a traveling merchant that just
Really?
turns up
Yeah,
and
there you go. Yeah,
that's it. Let me show you my wares. And it's like,
And it's
very, very good.
and it's a skill like anything else, right? I find what's kind of fun sometimes is to have a concept or a scenario in mind and just think about how it can go sideways, and then how would I react to it, and it just gets your mind sort of nimble. The old improv thing, the yes and, the no but, all that kind of stuff. You get a chance to just kind of get used to doing it. It's like any other muscle to use. And so if you know everything about your setting and you've got it well internalized, you don't even have to play for time. You can, take advantage of sort of those skills you've built to just say, yeah, that makes sense. Let's go and see where that direction takes us for a little bit. And then if it's getting a little too far off, then like Eric, you say, maybe the session, we end with a little bit of a cliffhanger on some decisions that the players were making and where they were trying to push the story. And then a little cliffhanger for the next session. And then where they're going because they've stated they are going to go and make a circus. And so now you can kind of handle that the next session, but you didn't like just stop them cold. You're able to say, yeah, let's play on that a little bit before we got to the end of the session.
Yeah, I think this is also one of the best uses of interludes too, which we talk a lot about. Savage Worlds has this mechanic of interludes where there's a table and there's kind of almost like different, campfire stories or travels or things that have happened, and getting your players starting to, okay, you guys take the reins. I want you to start improving, either stories or what's happening on your journey now, this weird direction they're taking, have them kind of start role playing. And then you can even mine that for ideas about like where their actual head's at, and kind of do it like in character, in game, rather than kind of the out of character, out of game, right? Of like, okay, so that could be a good resource too. And I think I've done that definitely for Savage Worlds because it's so easy of just like, all right, you guys want to go over here and do this? Well, let's do some interludes now of like, what does this journey look like going to this other place? You know, what are things that have happened, or what are some of the NPCs that you might have met, or what's what was like a battle? Like, you don't even have to do the actual battle, right? You can just have them start role playing, and besides it eating up time, it'll also, it'll make the experience richer of like the new direction because you're mining them in real time in some ways.
Yep, that's
critically in this, and this is something that we haven't talked about yet. It's about how do you somehow avoid this as well. One of the things that I try and do every session is to get a good sense at the end of each session where the group is wanting to go in the next session.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be quite extraordinary. So Masks of Nyarlathotep is a globe-trotting adventure that is a massive book. It's 1,800 pages is this damn module.
Wow.
And you can go to one of 6 countries, and each country has got 500 pages of material. And so I do a check-in every time I play one of those sessions. So just to be clear, we're going to England next, right? Just at the end of each. So once we are going this way, just so that you can know where the curveballs are going to come from. And in some ways, there's a little bit of a social contract here, isn't there? That once a group decides at the end of a session, we'll go to this village next, that they don't completely screw you over and at the beginning of the next session go, we've changed our mind, we're going to go here instead. There should be at least some kind of to and fro that what they say they'll do as a group, they'll follow through when you meet next to allow you to prepare properly.
James, that is of course, we've talked about that is like one of the best tips you can do. And I think that there's a hiccup here that GMs sometimes suffer is that, on that note, like if you haven't provided relevant information about the choices, and they at the end of the session they're like, okay, we want to do this, and then the next session you're like, oh yeah, and also, right, this place has whatever, like X, and this place has X. And they're like, well, if we had known that before, we would have chose the other one. So I think it's really important that if you are going to, when you do say that, make sure they know any real relevant information before you make that choice, and then you prep for the new thing, right? Because I've seen that happen multiple times of just, and it's perfectly understandable why it happens at the end of a session, right? We're all kind of tired, but that is a big hiccup with that, is that if you have not provided all the important information, then they can change their minds, and that's not bad on them either, right? Because they didn't have all the stuff that they needed to know. So yeah,
and I think some of these ideas with the secrets and clues and things like that help with that. Like even in our current campaign, you guys just did that a little bit, right? There's a troll attack on a village, and you guys decided, well, we're not going to go attack the trolls. We're going to go and get help.
Check the villagers, and
go to check on the villagers, and then go get help. And that's all would be very easy for me to go, I'm just not ready for this. But I already had written down that the wardens were doing this, and the people were doing this as part of the truths that I had. And so it was easy to just react to that with that one sentence and say, now, what are you guys going to do going forward? And you go, we're going to go help the wardens out, with the bandits so that we can get their help. Okay, well, I've already talked about what I think the bandits are or not are or whatever. And so now it's easy at the end of the session to say, okay, you guys are going after the bandits. You got the information. Now we're going to go and I'm going to prep that, take it that one sentence and turn it into a scenario that it wasn't quite ready to be yet, but it was hanging out there to be able to kind of pick off the tree. So good thoughts. Fantastic thoughts. Any other kind of last thoughts or ideas that you guys might have?
I think we've talked about this before in multiple, for different reasons, but sometimes if it is a big enough twist and you really feel like you need more time and it's such an upending, throw it to one of the players to do a one-shot or like a mini campaign, right? Just to give you time or to get you rethinking about things. That's just my final thing and that's happened in games I've been in where they were like, okay, this is the big change. I'm not sure where I'm going to go yet. So if somebody wanted to kind of run like a mini, a one-shot or something in the same world. But yeah, I think ultimately we always can't say this enough, but besides the designers get rules wrong, and it's just really not important. And you're going to get curveballs. You're not going to be prepared always. You might have hiccups. You might not know what to do, but that it's like all okay. And the players, if they're good players, will understand. If they don't understand, then they're not good players, and screw them anyways, right? So I think like everybody's there to have fun, and at least for me, they want to support the game master because they're making the magic happen. So never be afraid to be open with your feelings about these things, and never feel bad. It literally happens to absolutely everyone. I'm sure even Matt Mercer, right, some of the kings of improv and game mastering, it's happened to him before. So I just think that we all experience it. You're not alone, right?
It's a shared narrative. So
Yeah.
you know, they're driving direction and you're reacting to it, and you can say, you know what, I'm not ready for that yet.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly okay. Again, like we said, it's not a sign of weakness.
And it's a part of the game. It is actually the curveballs and the players doing weird stuff is actually it feels like it's part of the design of the game. It's that free fall. You can be whatever you want to be. So embrace it. Have fun with it. I certainly love it. Every time that you come up with a really weird thing that the group's going to do next, it certainly, you know, it keeps you on your toes and keeps you excited and keeps it fun and fresh. I say go with it, roll with it, have fun with it.
All right. Awesome. Really good thoughts. Appreciate that. Good job, guys. So, hey, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of it. Remember to drop by masteringtherpg.com to learn all about our other projects and support us. Please email gamemaster@masteringtherpg.com if you have a question, need some advice, comments, feedback, want adjudicating differences of opinion in your game group. We're there for you. We're going to help you out with that. If you like the show, please help us with positive reviews and send us email. We just love to hear from you. We love doing the show and we like to continue to do it. So once again, this is Carl with Eric and James. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Happy gaming.